You know, once upon a time, people actually believed everything they saw on TV. I know, shocking, right? But then Vietnam happened, and let's just say America's trust in its government went up in smoke faster than napalm in the jungle. Oh, honey, this was the war that changed everything: politics, society, the way we watch the news, and the tea on how we got involved, spicier than a bowl of pho. Presidents lied, protests exploded, and the government, let's just say the credibility gap was wider than the Pacific Ocean. Curious? You should be, because this war wasn't just a war. It was the moment America lost its innocence. Time to spill the tea on the Vietnam War. Okay, you want the tea on the Vietnam War? Buckle up because this one is a wild ride. Let's start from the very beginning, and I mean way back. Vietnam wasn't always about Cold War drama, it was a French colony, y'all. The French were all about that imperialism life in Southeast Asia, turning Vietnam into a money making machine. But the Vietnamese weren't having it. They wanted freedom, and who could blame them? Enter Ho Chi Minh, the man with a plan. He was a nationalist before he was a communist, but when no one else would back him, he turned to the Soviet Union for help, and this is where it gets spicy. Because now it's not just about independence, it's about communism versus capitalism. And you know, America was not going to let that slide. Why? Two words: Domino Theory. Basically, the US believed that if one country fell to communism, the rest of Southeast Asia would topple like dominoes. And if you think the US was just going to sit back and watch that happen, think again. They were all about that containment life, stopping the spread of communism at any cost. So let's fast forward to the 1960s. President John F. Kennedy steps in and he's like, we can't let Vietnam fall. So what does he do? He sends advisors to South Vietnam. Now, these weren't just pencil pushers. They were military advisors training the South Vietnamese army to fight off that communist North. But here's the tea. Kennedy knew this wasn't going well. South Vietnam's leader, No Diem Diem, was super unpopular, corrupt, repressive. People were burning themselves in protest. It was that bad. Kennedy was caught between a rock and a hard place. Support a dictator or risk losing South Vietnam to the communists? Well, spoiler alert, Diem gets assassinated, and the US looked the other way. But just a few weeks later, Kennedy was also assassinated. And who gets to inherit this hot mess? Lyndon B. Johnson. All right, it's time to spice up this tea. In 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin Incident happens. Allegedly, North Vietnamese torpedo boats attacked U.S. ships. And I say allegedly because, well, the details were fuzzy. Some say it was exaggerated. Some say it didn't happen at all. But Johnson took that incident and ran with it. He went to Congress and got the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution passed, giving him a blank check to do whatever he wanted in Vietnam. And when I say whatever he wanted, I mean full scale war. He sent in ground troops, started Operation Rolling Thunder, which was a massive bombing campaign, and escalated the conflict faster than you can say Cold War paranoia. You want a little lemon twist for your tea? This was the first living room war. Thanks to TV, Americans watched the violence unfold right in their living room. They saw the napalm, the body bags, the chaos. They started questioning the government's narrative. The government was saying, we're winning! But the footage was telling a very different story. This led to a credibility gap. The public no longer trusted the government. They felt lied to, betrayed even. Then came the Tet Offensive in 1968. The North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong launched massive attacks on South Vietnamese cities, including the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. Even though the U.S. technically won, the American public was shook. They were told the enemy was weak, but this attack showed that they were anything but. Support for the war nosedived. Johnson was like, I'm out, and didn't even run for re-election. Richard Nixon comes in promising peace with honor, but he does the exact opposite. He secretly bombed Cambodia to cut off enemy supply lines, which was super shady because Congress didn't even know about it. Then he starts Vietnamization, pulling out American troops and letting the South Vietnamese do the fighting. Sounds good, right? Except he kept bombing North Vietnam to force them to negotiate. The anti-war movement in the U.S. exploded. Protests were everywhere. College campuses, Washington, D.C., you name it. The anti-war protests were huge, and they weren't just a bunch of hippies. Middle America was turning against the war, too. The Kent State Massacre in 1970, where National Guardsmen shot unarmed college students, was the tipping point. The U.S. eventually signed the Paris Peace Accords in 1973, but it was just a temporary fix. 2 years later, Saigon fell to North Vietnam, marking the end of the war. The Vietnam War left America divided. It was the first war the U.S. lost, a humbling moment for a superpower. It shattered trust in the government, gave rise to the anti-war movement, and changed how Americans viewed patriotism and protest. And that, my friends, is the T on the Vietnam War, a turning point that changed America forever. Thanks for watching. If this video was helpful to you, click that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And as always, stay curious, stay critical, and never be afraid to spill the tea on history. Until next time.